So for the goals, it's to create an efficient and pleasant working environment that is conducive to productivity, community interaction, and to foster a more positive morale in the office. So we explored, let's see, before we go on to the 4 different scenarios, Chris, can we just go through the photos really quick of the existing conditions? And then you can toggle back. So go ahead. All right. So, a lot of the challenges I think come from, like I said, this sort of big, bulky, old furniture that's not intended to be super functional for these needs. And then kind of a collection of different desks and tables. Everything's maxed out. The kitchen is completely filled and then overflows into the mayor's closet. There's files in the hallway. It just is sort of at beyond capacity, in our opinion. So, Chris, if you go back to that first slide. So we explored 4 different scenarios. One was to optimize the existing layout, not touching tenant A or tenant B space, but just to improve what's there now. Then to expand into the smaller space B in the upper right corner, expand into larger tenant space A, and then in the end, we were also asked to explore utilizing both tenant space A and B. All right, so go through them. So with scenario 1, which was using the existing footprint, we were able to create a more efficient workspace by maximizing, kind of creating a new series of built-in storage pieces and furniture pieces that would really maximize workspace and storage space in the front office. At sort of the top where there's those 2 chairs there, we had a a counter height work surface with lots of storage underneath. We shifted Elizabeth's desk to the south side of the plan in order to free up that space in the top over there. We removed the kind of oblong table. And for the exercise here, we just put it out in the hallway. But this allowed for that separation, kind of when people come into the office, there was a feeling that, once people come in, they're sort of they're in the workspace. They're sitting down at the same place that everyone has all their papers. There's files that are open that might be private, they might not be, but everything's mixed together. So we created a little bit more of a reception zone where you could be welcomed by the front desk, but there is a little bit of separation and lots of workspace, lots of surfaces. And then everything is kind of intended to have built-in file storage anywhere to put it. With the existing space, so additionally with all of them, we did switch the mayor's office and the town manager and assistant town manager's office because it's a bigger footprint and there tends to be a lot more files and potentially 2 people in the town manager, assistant town manager's office. So we did switch those spaces. In this scenario, like I said, we added more file cabinets to any space we could. And then for the kitchen, we did expand to the hallway where we had files stored before. Chris, can you point to kind of the side kitchenette? We have like a little coffee station that we'll show you in the renderings. And just whatever we could put out in that hallway on a narrow surface, we tried to just create more space. So it definitely makes for a much airier, more comfortable feel, I think, with the newer furniture in the renderings, but it's still totally maxed out in that capacity as far as storage. So we really wouldn't recommend going this route. It is the most minimal approach, but it just doesn't accomplish everything that we need. So moving on to scenario 2, does anyone have a question about scenario 1?
Just curious, roughly how wide is that hallway that goes back there? It looks like it's maybe 4-ish. Is it more than 4?
It's with the little side pieces, it might be 5. I do think it's 4 actually. The door opening is.
I have a question. What's behind the kitchen? That empty rectangle right there.
We think maybe ductwork. I'm not totally sure. There's,
Okay.
there is like a sink in the kitchen. So my guess is this is where a lot of pipes and plumbing and things like that are happening. But yeah, it's a great question. There is another area where there is that kind of gap at the end of the hallway. And I think similarly, I mean, we could explore, but that would be my guess because there is a sink and refrigerator and things like that in the kitchen.
Okay.
So moving on to scenario 2. So in scenario 2 or B, in scenario 2, we looked at tenant space B, which is the smaller space in the upper right corner. And basically this allowed us to add another workspace and put a printer in there, put a bunch of files in there, just kind of load it up as much as possible with any of the files that we could get out of there. So potentially files that needed to be locked up, but just to help alleviate some of the overcrowding of the space. So it was useful, but it does allow for that additional workspace and for getting the printer out of the space, but it doesn't solve for having a shared space in the town manager's office. Doesn't solve for the kitchen, doesn't solve for the meeting room. We do have like a table out here, but I think Black Market is going upstairs all day long to get stuff from storage. There's people coming in and out. It's very much not a private space.
Leah, before you go on, I think Councilmember Bennett has a question. If we could pause for a minute.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Hi, thanks. I was just wondering whether you considered putting the mayor's office in tenant space B, because the mayor's not there full time and is just kind of dropping in occasionally.
So the thing about tenant space B is it's very disconnected from the rest of the office space because it is on the other side of this lobby. So it works great for record storage, but it's pretty isolated as far as like even another person would be outside the office. So it didn't feel totally appropriate, I guess, for something like the mayor's office or the town manager's office. It is also, I mean, it certainly could be an option, I guess. I just don't know what it would necessarily solve for. I think that we would just be then using the mayor's office for all the things that are shown here in tenant space B. We'd just be like swapping them. But with this, there's a little bit more of a cohesive office feel.
Yeah. So, I mean, I am curious, obviously Joanna would know better and Barb, like how often is the mayor there? And do they really need a fully functioning office or do they just need a place to crash once in a while? Couldn't that space still be the storage for, provide all the things that you currently have there, but also provide a desk for the mayor on those few occasions that they're in the office. And then that way the assistant town manager could have their own office.
So
I'm a bad example. I'm a bad example because I come in like twice a week after hours and don't stay super long time. So I don't know that. Yeah, I don't think my experience is indicative of.
right. I mean, it's a little tricky, obviously, because this project is running during COVID. So it's been sort of an unprecedented time as far as sort of staying home. It certainly might be different with Joanna as mayor. I know when we started the project, we were not even supposed to touch the mayor's office. It was like entirely out of scope. So when we first began, the mayor's office was the mayor's office, and we didn't even touch it. So that could be an option that could be explored. It is it's definitely a different kind of feel, as the space is very different than the rest of it. It has like windows that are very low to the ground. So anyways, I think that it's something that could be explored, but it wouldn't necessarily be my first choice for where to put the mayor, and then have them, if they were taking meetings, for example. It seems, I guess I like the flow of people coming in, being at reception, and then like coming back to the mayor's office, rather than there being like direct access to the mayor's door through the lobby.
Yeah, I think I'll just chime in. I think it's very much a case, generally, of who the mayor is and kind of their own personal circumstances in terms of how much time they spend in the office. I think as Leah indicated, I think when this project started, we were sort of working with the spaces, taking the kind of the mayor's office out of the equation. I think when Joanna came on board and she and I were kind of discussing this project, she certainly indicated to me, I think even before she took office, I think recognizing that we have the server and the copier in the town manager's office, ask whether I wanted to switch offices. And I think once Joanna sort of did that, I went back to Leah and Chris and said, okay, I think you can probably go back to sort of where you were going originally, which is to sort of switch the two offices. Particularly under this scenario, if the town manager and assistant town manager were going to be sharing an office, the current mayor's office is somewhat larger than the town manager's office, just from a square footage standpoint. So I think, Jerry, I think that's something we could certainly look at, as Leah indicated. If you haven't been in tenant space B, let me know when you want to drop by, and Elizabeth and I can let you in. It's an interesting room because it's kind of long and narrow with lots of broken up walls. With windows, but it certainly would accommodate a desk, particularly on the kind of the front part of the office.
I had a question as well, if it's okay.
I think Donna was first.
Sorry, I can't see the hands. I gotta fix my screen.
Thanks, Joanna. I just wanted to, I see where Jerry, where you're coming from, and it would make sense when the layout is a little bit different. I would also dare to bring into the conversation the concern of safety. It does seem like if somebody was in that office, it is quite far from everything else that's going on. And I don't know about others, but I would be not too keen to be in a space that far away from other individuals, depending on the time of day or what have you. But I may be looking into it a little too deeply.
Steve?
The storage, I think Leah might have mentioned that Black Market is using that. Is that the case? The storage that's hatched off?
Hi.
All right, getting alerts on my phone from possible floods here in Howard County.
Oh no.
Yeah, Stephen, I think the hash part tenant space B, if you're talking about the area immediately to the left, yeah, that's a storage space that Black Market leases. They seem to keep a lot of canned goods and things like that. So they're kind of coming up throughout the day as they need to restock things in the kitchen.
So that's not a pandemic thing. That's it's been that way. And then
Yes.
I just never noticed the door even there. So okay,
It's
I've
been-
never seen any of
apologize.
those spaces. So
I just got kicked off for like 2 minutes. Somebody called my phone and my earbuds jumped to my phone and kicked me off the meeting. And so I powered off my phone and got back on. But
thanks, Apple.
yeah, I have not mastered the earbuds situation. It happens to me way too often. But I think I missed what the person was asking before, Stephen. Is there any questions that I need to answer that I was?
No, I think, Leah, there was just a discussion about the separation from tenant space B from the rest of the office, and perhaps,
Okay.
one, a sense of not being connected to the office space, but also just the sense of it being isolated from a security standpoint, potentially.
Yeah, maybe really quickly, would it be helpful for us to open up some of the photos from the site visit of tenant space A and B? Because we
I have
don't
a
have
quick
those
question
included.
before you go there.
Mhm.
So my question is it reasonable to have, I mean, for the town manager and the assistant town manager to work in one space as opposed to giving the town manager their own office and then putting the assistant town manager in tenant space B as a better work design?
That was something, Lisa, we talked about. I think ideally when you have two people who spend a lot of time, in meetings and on the phone, certainly I would say, having some kind of separate office space is sort of helpful.
Right.
Particularly if the town manager happened to say, be talking to the town attorney about something that's confidential.
Right.
So I think that that is something that I think, depending on, as we walk through these options and depending on where you all land after your discussion next Tuesday night, certainly I think we can have Leah and Chris kind of explore some other options that you'd like to see.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
we do have that as one of the pros of tenant space B is that it would allow a potential workspace for the assistant town manager or other people who do come in and work sometimes, like George. There's the town accountant is there sometimes, and additional people who would need to use that, use a desk. We tried to put at least one desk in there for that. But I do in general feel like the more that the town staff can be in the consolidated office area, it's kind of ideal in comparison to tenant space B. Chris, do you want to toggle quickly to the photo of tenant space B? And then maybe when we go to talk about A, we can show A really quick. I'm just seeing the PowerPoint.
Oh, sorry. Hang on.
That's okay.
Better now?
Yes. And do you have a view kind of from the lobby of just sort of how it's like yeah, so there's next to it is that storage area, I guess, that Black Market's using as like a pantry. And you just come off the public elevator and it's kind of the first door on the right. So if it's used occasionally and kept locked, I think that would be kind of the best use for the space. And if you, Chris, is there a photo that sort of shows where the office doors are in relation to that? Everything but.
Looks more narrow in photo than it does in plan. Does it feel that way, or is the plan deceiving or the photo is deceiving?
Oh, of the office, that
That
tenant
little
B,
corner place, yeah.
it's pretty intimate. Yeah, I mean, the windows are like a foot off the floor. It's like it has some beautiful light, but it's otherwise a sort of challenging space. It is definitely cozier than it looks. Okay, so do you want to quickly show, or while this is up and I'm talking about it, do you want to look for some pictures of, oh, we can see the screen now. I don't know if you're able to just.
Sorry, Leah, pictures of which one?
Oh, space A. If we're gonna jump
sure.
to that one next, we might as well just, yeah, that's easier way. Okay. All right, so tenant space A is interesting because it has its own separate entrance through this hallway, but it is connected to the office. So it can become kind of a cohesive unit with the office if it's used. And I think that that's a really nice factor. Yeah, so Chris, just mouse through those really quick and then we can jump over to the floor plan.
So
And then you can see that it's already currently being used for a lot of file storage. Okay. I think that there's a lot of redundant pictures of like boxes because we were trying to make sure that we were accounting for all of the things that needed to be stored. So I was trying to document everything. Okay, so scenario 3 was expanding into tenant space A, which is this whole area in the upper right corner. If Chris, can you mouse to kind of show the whole bounds of that? Yeah, not the stairs and restroom, but that whole zone. So we felt this option was a significant improvement from just taking tenant space B. It's a significantly larger space. We loved that we could create a dedicated conference space that could also be kind of a break room or community gathering area. We felt like there was, so in this scenario, we created a private record storage area that also had some desk space as well. And we liked that it provided that as ample space. One of the really nice advantages as well was that we were able to do a kitchenette in the larger space and reallocate the space in that closet to hold the server and the printer in a space that's isolated from people's workspaces and could be locked and secured, which is great from an IT security standpoint. So the cons, with everything, it's just going to be like the bigger and better, the more the cost. So that was kind of the downside. But otherwise, we felt like it was a huge step in the right direction as far as getting storage space for everything and creating a really comfortable work environment, appropriate storage, good flow. We liked this option quite a bit. So when we originally presented the 3 of these, we were asked to come back with a 4th scenario, which was to expand into both spaces. And for that one, the advantage of this compared to the previous one that we just looked at, we were able to, instead of being primarily record storage, in the area by the conference room, we were able to create a designated assistant manager's office, which was nice, and then have a town manager's office. Lots of room for storage. He said tons of work surfaces, places to hold meetings, area for visitors, lockable storage, dedicated IT, user-friendly kitchen. We really felt like this was a great solution, albeit with the, oh, and the other thing is with this scenario, we were able to bring back the town book collection to put in the, Chris, can you point to where it is? It's kind of in the reception area here so that people can look at, or the town authors collection, so that people can look at that in the waiting area, because those books I think have to stay in the office, but they can be viewed there. So there's enough space to kind of bring those back and have them on display, which is nice. So, okay, we're gonna do, I think at this time, we'll do a fly through of scenario 4, followed by the renderings that were in the presentation. So you can see we've created a lot of storage spaces and file cabinets and
Leah, I think Councilmember Max has a question.
oh, yes.
It
Should
would
we
be
pause?
helpful. It would be helpful if you could put the dimensions of the spaces on the plan.
Okay,
Like
we can
the
absolutely do that.
really helpful as we're
Sure.
looking at options. Thanks.
Yeah, we can, should we just send out a set of plans that are dimensioned? And Barbara can send that to the group?
That would be helpful.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Chris. So this is now the mayor's office. Room for mayor's desk, workspace, and an area to take meetings. There is a kind of connected door here. This would be the town manager's office. We do have the other desks shown here. Oh, yes, Ken?
Yes, if I might ask, it looks to me that if you take both tenant office A and B, that it essentially doubles the space. Is that approximately correct?
Doubles the space of the existing office.
Correct.
I think it's probably pretty close. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris. We can add square footages, actually, if that's helpful. So here, you want to pause for a second. Here's the kitchenette, where we've just been able to like build out a true kitchen space, which could also be used by people who are having, you know, gatherings or meetings in the conference room. All right, go ahead. There is a column in the middle, so that would stay. Assistant town manager's office. Conference room. This very serious businessman. And then here's our kind of lockable file storage. The other factor that was kind of relevant in all of this is my understanding that the archives are essentially full as well. They're really at capacity, but ideally everything that's up here is sort of files that are being accessed somewhat regularly. They're not ready to be archived, but there is just a lot of paper because of the nature of the work. All right, Chris, do you wanna, you can mouse through the renderings and we can take any, well, I guess we should go to, actually budget is gonna be the big thing that will probably lead to lots of questions. So we did try to itemize this. Budgets, I think, always create sticker shock. I feel like I get sticker shock every time I do it. But especially right now, we're finding the cost of everything to be super high. We created first sort of a high-end estimate where we were doing a lot of custom millwork to create these really specific cabinetry pieces. And then with the low estimate, it was trying to source much more like IKEA versions of it where we could, and really just consolidating the custom things for areas where we really needed a very specialty item. Even with IKEA, what does happen is you then have to pay an installer. They come not put together, and there's a whole assembly cost that can be really expensive. So we did have to factor that in as well. Going down it, so with any of this, you can see there's demolition, all of the furniture removal. And then for construction, we really tried to give a true estimate of all the work that would have to be done related to kind of any of the electrical work, adding outlets. If we do switch the kitchen, accounting for plumbing, our goal and our hope is that we're high with numbers. We really would like to come in low. I think that this just helps give that real world look at it. So in addition to kind of the construction components, then we have all of the case goods, furniture items, which can be, you know, if we decide that we don't need any desk chairs, for example, then, you know, money can come out of there. There's sort of ways that we can get numbers out of any of this. Soft goods would be cushions. Window treatments are a really important line item because there is a really intense glare, I think, especially in the late afternoon, I understand, where the sun can be really pretty intense. And I mean, it was an issue across the board. I know for Elizabeth, in general, wanted a lot of lighting control. And then in the offices, the windows just get hit with a lot of sun. So that was a big issue. So we did want to provide a really effective window treatment with like a solar shade that would block light, cut glare. Then for technology, Chris, do you want to jump in and talk about the technology?
Sure, yeah. So given that in two of the scenarios, we were taking that additional conference room space in tenant space A, I know that right now there isn't currently a large digital display for presentation for council meetings or even review or presentations internally. So we looked at both sort of a higher end commercial LCD and the sort of more prosumer mid-range grade display and like an articulating arm with a recessed outlet so that there would be, you know, the appropriate presentation hardware for a conference or anything like that. And in line also with moving those IT components like the server or the printer, we know that from discussing with Barb, there'd be an associated cost with that. So that category really just mainly is about those components with a nominal budget for the new kitchenette, should that be a thing that gets proceeded on.
Leah, I think Councilmember Shoup has a question, if he can jump in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got a couple of questions, and I wanted to go back to, can we just go back to one of the floor plans for a second? Because the last one, I just wanted to. Okay, so the first question is, we can use like four is probably the best. The first question is that half round wall, and you may not be able to answer this, but does that half round wall have to stay, or could that go?
We can answer that. We got a resounding yes, it has to stay from George when we asked. My understanding is that it's like a historic detail of the existing structure, and that it was a can of worms to, it's part of, I guess there was a spiral staircase there going to the attic. And I'm not totally clear on why, but the answer that I got was definitely a no, we could not do anything with that wall, because it would be great if we could.
Yes.
Although probably costly, I will add. I think that it's super, super thick because it's the original construction.
Sure.
And probably has some structural load to it too. So it is probably a can of worms as far as like structural engineering as well. I don't know.
And okay, makes sense. The second thing is, and I see you put it on some of the renderings, but not on others, but in the mayor's office is shown, there's that corner hutch, which is shown this one, which I think must be a historic detail also. So that would have to stay, I assume.
Yeah,
I think so.
that's my understanding, Phil.
And then the final question is, the conference room in scenario 3 was a 10-person room, and now we've gone down to 8. Can you go back to 10?
Yes. So what did we do? I think we changed the kitchen a little bit. But yeah, if there is a desire, we can explore that. How much did the toggle back and forth, Chris? Did it change
it shifted because the column on the original plans is not where it really is in real life.
Oh, okay, that is what it. So we went out between the two meetings when we met to present the first 3 scenarios. We surveyed more, and the column was not where it was shown on the floor plans. It was actually right here. So we did modify. That being said, we could potentially compromise on the new kitchen, make that a little bit less luxurious, potentially make it a little bit smaller, and get the conference room larger if you guys find that that's a higher priority item, that you want a 10-person conference room. I think that we could find some ways to reduce the footprint of the kitchen.
Okay. Great. And that was all I had. Thank you.
Okay, great. So let's see, hopping back to the budget really quick. We also have a 10% contingency built in as well. So just to talk through all of the numbers that get you to these grand totals. And I think that our hope would be, you know, if you opt for sort of the higher version, that we would end up lower than that. And similarly for the low estimate, I think we would still try to be lower than that. But we do try to, it's an estimated budget, and things are really crazy right now with construction costs. So which is, I think, the other reason to not touch any, kind of cut into any walls where we don't need to, or touch any, you know, if we take away even if we took away that hutch, then we would have to place something else there, and do all the drywall and patching of the floor and all of that stuff potentially, that it just spends a lot of money that we could potentially save.
This,
So-
this budget, this estimated budget is for using scenario 4, taking both spaces, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. How does the budget change for the other scenarios? Or like, what does the budget look like for scenario 1? What does the budget look like for scenario 2 and 3?
Great thought. So I mean, the main changes I think between any of them is really the kitchen and the conference room, sort of everything associated with option 3 and 4. For scenario 2, where you're taking tenant space B, it's like a marginal difference. It's a tiny bit more furniture because you're really just using that space as like a desk and a storage area. So the pricing between option 1 and option 2 is very similar. And then for option 3 and option 4, you're adding conference room and kitchenette.
Can we see the budget for scenario 1?
Sure. Yeah. We don't have it right here. What we put together was for the final one, but we can recalculate that we'd basically remove the kitchenette. We would remove the conference room. Those would be the primary items. So here, Chris, if you want to, so it would definitely remove big ticket items.
Okay, that can wait. That can be something that you get to us in the next day or so, if that's okay.
Sure. We can kind of do like if you need it quickly, we can do like a kind of quick and dirty removing of the kitchen and conference room. And any items, unless, yeah, Chris, do you feel like we can turn that around in the next day or so?
Yeah, 1000%.
Okay, great.
Leah, I think Councilmember DeBose had a question, then Councilmember Max.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Barbara. Quick question. I'm assuming, but I'm not 100% sure, which is why I'm asking the question. Any need to move any HVAC or air conditioning, heating parts of the system? I was just thinking of for instance, the room where you have a printer and or any kind of computer equipment usually require a little bit more circulation. I don't think we have any mega computers unless, there's something I don't know, but otherwise I think that it would be okay. Right.
So for some sort of potentially like a fan for that now kitchenette.
I'm just asking, across for the whole entire.
In general,
yeah.
No, we didn't allocate that. I think the only area where we might want to ask someone would be if we did, here, Chris, go back to option 3 or 4, I guess, where we are putting up a wall between the conference room and the assistant manager. So right now there are low walls in that space. So we would potentially want to look at the way the HVAC is laid out there. If we kept it as a low wall, you wouldn't have as much privacy, but you would have completely continuous airflow. But our goal is to be as hands-off as possible with HVAC.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And there was another question.
Yeah, my question was the budget doesn't include the lost revenue of the spaces that we would now be allocating for office space. It's about 30 grand, I think. Barb did a little budget. So the budget would really be losing an additional $25,000, $30,000 of revenue for spaces that we would no longer be renting. And then I think you should really include some kind of project management hourly allocation at $150 an hour for some number of hours to do the bid review and documents and submissions? And is permits going to be required for this with the county? Do you know?
I don't. I think it would depend what option we were
Right.
selecting, but I would think no, in part because the contractor who was in tenant space A previously, I think had a kitchenette in his space that he demoed when he left. It might be a little bit different because it's a town
Sure.
government. I certainly wouldn't permit it if it were any other office space, probably. Usually people try to avoid permitting this kind of like
Right.
mostly
I agree.
FF&E.
Can avoid it, but the question is, are we going to be required for it? And then the other thing is some kind of allocation of consulting hours, because this budget is really going to be different if we also retain you to oversee the construction management of the project. So I would include that as some number of hours in a budget, just so we have a total cost, giving up the revenue and including your hourly fee for construction management part of the whole budget, because it's going to be a big number. I did a conference room in one of my projects recently, and I bought some big conference tables from Gerstel's, and it was really, really, really reasonable. Used conference tables are really, they've got tons of them, and they do a really good job of refinishing them, and conference chairs. So there are some ways to save some money that I could maybe be helpful with. But
Great.
I just think we need a better handle on how much money we're really going to be obligated if we go forward. So that would be my suggestion. Some kind of an allocation of a number of hours that you think would be a reasonable number for the construction management piece of it. Right now, there's nothing in there for that.
Yeah,
Right.
Leah, if I may, I'd have to check the number and I will include that in the information for your meeting next week. I did include some money in the FY 2023 budget on the operating side, assuming that Lumber and Light might continue to do some work for us. Tenant space A has not been rented for about 2 years.
Right.
Tenant space B hasn't been rented for about a year. I think
Right.
as I shared, I am having someone who's a commercial real estate person in Kensington who was recommended to me by someone. He's going to stop by. He's scheduled to stop by tomorrow and just very kindly just agreed to tour the spaces and to give us some feedback. So I'll share that information with you.
But the point is that if we do use tenant space A and B, we're going to preclude the opportunity for generating revenue spaces. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% correct. And I think the question is trying to get a sense of the commercial real estate market as it exists today, as opposed to maybe fiscal year 2008. I don't know if there's any difference between now and then, but I think that's why I tried to find a resource to come and look at the space and give us some technical expertise from someone who actually is in that arena, because I certainly am not.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Leah, I think Councilmember Schultz has a question.
Yes, once again, I've got a few things. First is, I don't know if you know, Barb, but I think maybe some of the HVAC comes through the ceiling.
I think it does. I can ask George tomorrow.
Check and see. I believe it does, that would definitely help with flexibility, especially if you have to do a little bit of movement of HVAC. Okay. The second thing was, as far as the revenue goes, as you mentioned, we haven't rented it in a while. The other thing is that depending on what we do with Town Hall, for instance, tenant space B, if we use scenario 4, is currently being used principally as a storage area. And depending on what we do with Town Hall, it's possible we could move that storage out over to Town Hall and then free that space up for rental. We don't know. Third thing is time. What are the time scenarios? Like, how long would it take from notice to proceed till move-in for the various scenarios?
That is a great question. Again, it's really going to depend on what option. I think maybe we probably mistakenly were kind of thinking there would be like a direction that we move forward in, and then we could figure out timeline. But if that's part of the decision making, I certainly understand why all the costs are part of the decision making. If the timeline is a factor as well, we can kind of try to put together scenarios. It's really hard to predict how long it's taking to do things right now. Just I found it to be really expensive and really slow.
The reason I bring it up, and Stephen can speak more to this, but we're looking at redoing town hall. But the last time we did a heavy amount of work in the town offices, what we did was move the town offices over to town hall.
Mm-hmm.
So I would see a scenario where we would move town offices over to town hall. We would renovate this space, then we would move back again, and then you would start the renovation on town hall. And so that's where I could see trying to come up with a time estimate might help us if we're going to do a scenario.
Right. Well, so as far as the actual act of the construction, so I was thinking more like if we're having pieces made, I feel like that has been really slow, and ordering of material. I think the actual installing, it's primarily like a lot of case goods that could be brought in and assembled. And then most of like the actual true construction is happening in tenant space A, which is unoccupied. So as far as displacing people, I think we could keep that extremely minimal, because there might be some hammering for a few days with tenant space A, but we wouldn't really have to kick anyone out. And then we could try to do as much of the move out and move in of furniture kind of as quickly as possible, which also might require some sort of a staging place to gather materials, if we were to try to do it as efficiently as possible, which is an added cost. So I don't know if there's a place. You mentioned town hall. I was actually there last weekend for a 1-year-old's birthday party. Is there a place in there that would we be able to put some materials there? I know there's a couple different rooms. Or would it be more like we'd want to rent a storage unit to receive and store furniture?
How about like a 20-foot Conex box in the parking lot? And I say that because that's what we did do it. The contractors did when they rebuilt our bathhouse for the pool. Is they dropped a pod in there, but I mean, you could use a Conex box, use whatever. But
right.
I could see where it could free up some space to conceivably do that for short term.
Yeah, and then it would all be on site, so there wouldn't be an additional transportation fee, which is nice.
So how much of a displacement do you think it would be like a week of true displacement, or I just need to get a sense of.
As far as taking all the furniture in and out, I think we could do it in a few days. Chris, what do you think? Like not talking about tenant space A, but just talking about the office area where people are working. I would think 3 days.
3 to 4 days, just get stuff out, bring new furniture in, do any, cable management under desks, make it look really beautiful, and yeah, it's a few days.
If everyone can speak up just a little bit, I don't know how the weather is in Garrett Park, but we're having a major thunderstorm here in Columbia, so I'm having a little trouble hearing everybody with the thunder. So if you could speak up, that'd be great.
We were saying 3 to 4 days. I think probably a week is like a safer estimate if we want to empty everything out, probably clean, paint, let it dry, bring stuff in, touch up. That gives us a little more buffer. So let's say a week. And then as far as the the other spaces, that could really be done without displacing anyone.
Anybody else have questions? Otherwise, I think we've got a good sense of what's proposed.
Yeah.
I was curious, a couple of years ago, it was becoming an issue that Black Market had extra tables and chairs and so on and so forth were being stored in the hallway downstairs. Is that still around, or is that still a need to get that out of there?
Yeah, they do seem, Stephen, to have some constraints. There are some, trying to remember when I walked through yesterday, there's still some like high top chairs that are in the hallway. I think one of the kind of running issues we've had is just they're storing things on the fire escape, which is actually a fire code violation. And I'm guessing it's probably because they're short on space.
Okay, thanks.
If I may, speaking of space and the black market, I'm assuming the black market must pay for the storage space on this floor as well, correct? Since they're
Right.
in and out getting canned goods, which to me is strange, but I said it.
Yeah, there's actually two separate payments. Well, really three separate payments they make. One is for the lease, which I have been able to locate for the restaurant space. There's a separate payment for the storage area, but candidly, I've not been able to put my hands on the lease to know if it's the right amount, and Barbara Black doesn't seem to know where her copy is either. So I have suggested to her that we just execute a new lease in the near future that encompasses all the spaces, just to simplify things.
And I hate to put it out there, but is there any way to move them? It's just a very awkward for anybody involved. I mean, it's a town office, not somebody's kitchen pantry.
Yeah, ideally, I'm not sure where that would be because there's not that much room in Penn Place, but I don't disagree with you, Donna. You know, from their standpoint, they're having to come up and down, you know, the stairs to get supplies. You know, occasionally we have had some issues with just, you know, kind of restaurant remnants. If you've ever waitressed like I have, you know, things get dropped on the floor and get kind of a little nasty. So if we could find a space for them, you know, where that could be not on the third floor, that'd be great, but I'm not sure where that would be. And I think they certainly have a need to have some sort of pantry.
Yeah, I
That's
can't
unfortunate.
imagine they'd be using that space if they had another option.
Right, I think they're trying to understandably maximize their dining space on the second floor, and it is pretty tight there. I'm sure all of you've eaten there. I think, Lisa, you got a question?
You're muted.
You're planning to use all the existing flooring and not replace any flooring or polish it or polyurethane it or do anything to it. Is that correct in this budget?
That's correct in this budget. Yeah. If you would like us to add it to the budget, we can put a line item for that.
Well, I guess if we're doing all in the scenarios, is the existing flooring going to work? I guess that's the question. I haven't really looked to see, but somebody needs to assess that and figure out if we need to use the existing flooring or if we're going to need to replace it. And if it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is that the existing flooring is in good shape, and it's certainly part of the historic character of the building. I think, Lisa, to your point, if it's more putting some sort of coating or something just to protect it, that's certainly something, you know, I can discuss with George and get his input on that.
Yeah, it's definitely the real deal. I'm a big fan of kind of the real wood, and so it didn't jump out at me as like off-putting. It might, you know, be like worn. Here, Chris, is there a photo that has it?
But so we're not moving any walls, or there's not going to be any areas where there's not going to be flooring, or it's going to have to be patched in order to do these scenarios.
So in tenant space A, the partition walls that are there were actually added by the former tenant. So it should just be on top of the floor, I think. I believe that's what George determined also when we were there, that everything was kind of placed on top of the floor. So our goal would be, yeah, there shouldn't be.
I can go look really quick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you
Well,
could.
I was gonna say, look, how does your floor look?
Yeah. Stretch your legs a little bit, Joanne, and go check it out for us.
All right, be right back.
I think while she's doing that, I think Donna, you had a question?
Sorry about that. And I hate to harp on the poor tenants downstairs. Is there a way to, I'm sorry, just the fact that they have to cross the lobby in order to get their canned goods is just mind-boggling, and it reminds me of being in like communist Russia, where everything was just shoved wherever the hell you could find it. And it's just tacky. I'm sorry. So I'm wondering, is there a way that you can redo, maybe there's some floor reconfiguration where you can put them, maybe their supply closet closer to the stairs or something like that, so that it's not so in your face.
Visible. We can kind of talk about it internally, Donna. I think it's just going to be challenging. I off the top of my head, I really can't think of how we would do that, but I don't disagree with you that it's certainly worth kind of doing another look and see if there's anything we can come up with, because it certainly would be better for them as well.
I mean, maybe even the space that's currently in tenant B/storage and kind of swap them out so that our offices are closer together instead of having a pantry in between them.
Yeah, I don't think there's much meaningful space between using A and B. B is even, looks to me, and Leah and Chris jump in, I'm not necessarily the most spatially oriented person, but B looks to me like it's actually smaller than the space they're using currently.
No,
I'm not sure if we ever even showed you the storage area because it wasn't part of the equation.
Tenant B is a larger space than what they have currently. Okay. Yeah. But I will say that the space they're using currently is large enough that it's hard to imagine there's like a little closet somewhere else that would where it would be able to go, unless it was some sort of like outbuilding attached to the ground floor that was able to be constructed. I know like there's tons of that during COVID, obviously, tons of little outbuildings and anywhere that anyone could like get more space to spread things out. So there's certainly resources for that, but I can't imagine they want to like go outside either to get their product. Although I did just work on a concept where they do go like across their front parking lot to get stuff for the kitchen. For a fine dining concept, so it happens.
Yeah, I was just not saying to swap the rooms, but maybe even just move the wall so that you can make their pantry bigger for our offices and just give them the same square footage over around the corner. I'm just also looking at the flow charts, which I really appreciate, because that you'd be missing in color in that case.
Right. You don't have the overlap of the traffic.
Yeah.
So Joanna, how does tenant space A look with the floors?
Oh, it looks beautiful. And it looks like that partition, I kind of shimmied it a little bit, and it was not built into the floor. It didn't seem to be.
Yeah, it looks like millwork.
Yeah, I think it was a mill worker.
Tenant A was a mill worker, yes.
I think, yeah.
Still is.
Oh, yeah.
I think Phil, you had a question?
Yeah.
Maybe he wants to bid on the project.
Right. Yeah.
He does residential. So.
A couple of comments. As far as I can recall, ever since Penn Place opened, Black's Market has been using that storage space upstairs as their pantry. And they do have a shed, but I believe it's mainly for things like extra chairs and other stuff, and their firewood is kept in a shed. So they kind of need the space, it seems, just based on what I've seen over the years. And to make tenant space B into storage, I think the nice thing about tenant space B is that you've got 3 windows in that area, which brings in a bunch of light.
Yeah, and you do have a lot of space for file cabinets as well, which because of kind of the limited aperture at the front of that storage space, you don't have that much space at all in their unit. I think they're just kind of using it almost like a walk-in.
Yeah, my recommendation would have been just to take the wall down and then reconfigure that one large space into 2 smaller spaces, making it equal, equal of the square footage it is currently, just scooting them over so that the flow is better. That's all.
I don't know if it opens a can of worms that we don't want to go, that we don't want to consider.
I'm thinking that the cost would be
prohibitive.
High, yeah.
One thing we could consider is taking the archives, see if the floor could handle archives infrastructure and bring the archives up here. And then that would open up the basement for storage for black market.
That's a really good.
Might be nice to do, considering I worked on a project where Montgomery County's archives, their parks archives, got flooded in the basement. So,
but I know one concern is whether the floors could handle the load, because I know archives infrastructure, their shelving infrastructure is really heavy, and
I will say that room does not feel. We actually talked about whether or not having a bunch of file cabinets in there was going to be a problem. It's not. It doesn't feel like the most. Like I would be worried potentially about doing the archive there, but if maybe a structural engineer looked at it, it would be fine. But in that scenario, then would we take down the wall and use the whole space as archive, and they would it would
possibly
include,
or put the conference room up there if there's some structural benefit to having archives back where the conference room is, and kind of flip-flop that. I mean, depending on structurally, that might
and then you have like the more public area and then the private area, which is nice.
Be interesting to see what that construction is, because the left half of the plan is from the 1870s or 80s, and the right half is from 2002, 2003. So it probably wasn't too weak, but it may not have been built for more than office PSF.
Yeah, it kind of felt like standing on somebody's built-in porch a little bit. And that might have just been also because of the low windows, and it was like a psychological thing, but
yeah.
Okay.
Probably just 2x10s. So, okay.
I mean, so I think we need to discuss what we need, what direction we want to go. I think that's going to be part of our council meeting Tuesday. Is there anything else that we need to have Leah and Chris for?
I don't think so, Joanne. I just wanted to, before we adjourn, just wanted to recap, make sure I didn't miss anything that everyone, kind of follow-up information to hopefully include in the packet for your Tuesday meeting. I think this is Leah and Chris's work, not mine, thankfully, but you wanted to see the plans with the square footage and with the, I think, dimensions. There was a request for information about kind of the different budget scenarios, not just for scenario 4, but for the other options, as well as just making sure we properly accounted for the cost of lumber and light services to sort of oversee everything. Is there anything that I missed?
And the offset of the revenue if we go with taking away space in A and B from rental income.
Yeah,
so I just that in there some way, shape, or form if we decide what a per square foot reasonable rental rate would be for the space, just so we can see the total cost of the project.
Yeah, I hope when I speak to the commercial real estate person who's based in Kensington tomorrow, that hopefully he'll be able to give me an idea of the marketplace in our area and kind of based on, the condition of our space. And if I'm able to get that information, I will include it in your agenda packet as far as background materials for sure.
Real quick, it might be, sorry.
And another resource might be if Susie Balamasi, Dan Simon's wife, her brother is a commercial real estate agent.
Okay.
Or broker, whatever the word is, but he might have his finger on the pulse of that. I would think he definitely would. So
Okay.
he could be
Thank you for that.
a great
Okay.
resource.
I'll reach out to her as well. Stephen, you had an information request too?
Just a note on the commercial real estate side. It'd probably be helpful to ask like what's the market now and what it might be like 2, 3, 4 years from now.
Yeah.
So I know like in my business, like it's much different now than it was 2019 for certain aspects, but we expect it to be back 2026-ish. So we should factor that in with the long range plan.
And there was a note from Ken about, he said regarding the archives, folks considered moving it previously. The fear was fire if it was moved to the upper floors.
Okay. Okay.
I've got a question for you. Did you get something about the timing? Because unfortunately, I dropped off.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Phil. Yeah, I think just kind of the timing from once we execute a contract, I think for what we refer to, Leah, as phase 2 in your contract, kind of going from that standpoint. So yeah, if that's something you and Chris can talk about and get back to me on, that'd be great.
Okay, great.
And that includes the time to complete?
Okay, so we should assume kind of that you're engaging us for all the phases then, and that we would be handling, like overseeing the construction and everything.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
What does your contract currently account for? Just this conceptual work?
I'll have to go back and look at it. I think that it goes through, I think it's through the design phases. I'll have to go back and check, but we'll include that in the budget.
Yeah, my recollection, Leah, is that when you submitted your proposal, and I apologize, I know I sent it out to everybody, but I needed to go back and look at it as well. I think we contracted with you for phase 1, but there was an option to continue working with you all for phase 2.
We're in phase 2. There's like maybe 3 or 4 phases. So I think that the question is sort of whether we continue on through like past so right now we have kind of the really the design components, but we don't have like millwork drawings and all these really specific stuff. So we can go, we would certainly be going the whole way into that. The question is like, are we overseeing construction, which we absolutely can do. But I think that that was probably like an added service because we didn't know at the time. We hadn't met anybody and we just had this, RFP. So now that we know that you're interested, we can figure out what those numbers would probably look like and include that as an item.
Okay. I think, Joanna, we've covered everything. So I'll let you decide whenever you're ready to adjourn.
Okay. We're not planning to make a decision on Tuesday. We'll have to see how much in line we all are. So just so you know, it won't be like we won't be coming back to you with a decision in a week or 2. It might be a month.
That's fine. I don't think that we have an expectation of an immediate decision.
Great. Okay.
The other thing, I think the other question was permitting. I can dig into that. I don't know if there's possibly like a town resource who might know about whether or not we need to permit for this specific instance when we're talking about like a kitchenette.
I can probably reach out to someone at the county and try to get some information. Or if you know someone, Leah, that that you can call as well. But I can certainly take a first shot at it.
Okay, great. I mean, there's people that I would ask for kind of hospitality. I think it's just the government, because you're a government institution, that it's I know the terms and conditions stuff there was a lot of print about all the different terms and conditions for government work. So
Yeah,
probably
what I suspect, Leah, is that we would still be subject to whatever those permitting requirements are. The only thing that I can recall, we did a huge building project when I was in Tacoma Park, and I think we still had to get permits, but I don't think the county charged us for the permits, as I recall. It's been a number of years, so.
okay. I would think it would be minimal. We would only work with licensed contractors for the subcontractors involved, obviously. And then what we could do is just, for any area that we needed like a permit approved by the county, we could, do specific documentation for those.
Okay, well, with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you very
Thanks, bye.
much.
Bye.